For decades, the U.S. has failed to veto a UN Security Council resolution condemning Israeli settlement activity. The U.S. officially abstained, while the remaining 14 other members of the Security Council voted yes. The resolution calls for Israel to immediately and completely cease all settlement activity in the occupied Palestinian territory, including East Jerusalem. U.S. UN Ambassador Samantha Power said the U.S. would veto any resolution undermining Israel's security or imposed a settlement to the conflict. She said the resolution voted on today did not meet the requirements for a U.S. veto.
It is because this resolution reflects the facts on the ground and is consistent with U.S. policy across Republican and Democratic administrations throughout the history of the State of Israel that the United States did not veto it.
Minutes after the vote, President-elect Trump tweeted out, and I quote, "As to the UN, things will be different after January 20th. The vote on the resolution, which was sponsored by Egypt, was supposed to take place yesterday. Mr. Trump called for a veto at that time, and soon thereafter, Egypt took the resolution off the table. This morning, other countries put it back in play. Many Israelis were angry and disappointed, but not surprised by the U.S. vote. Relations between President Obama and Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu have been strained, and there has been growing speculation about some type of Obama December surprise." Meanwhile, Republican Senators John McCain and Lindsey Graham expressed outrage at the UN vote. And on the other side of the aisle, New York Democrat Chuck Schumer joined the chorus of criticism, saying, and I quote, "It is extremely frustrating, disappointing, and confounding that the administration has failed to veto this resolution." Israeli reaction has also been very harsh. The office of the Israeli Prime Minister, Benjamin Netanyahu, said Israel rejects this shameful anti-Israeli resolution and will not abide by it. The statement went on to say that Israel looks forward to working with President Trump and the future U.S. Congress. Shannon?
David Lee Miller live at the UN. Thank you. Reaction to President Obama's move has been harsh, and not just from Republicans. And the White House moved quickly to explain why it did what it did. Correspondent Kevin Corke is traveling with President Obama in Hawaii and reports from Honolulu. Hello, Kevin.
Yeah, you're right on the money, Shannon. The president made this decision by himself, but not after close consultation with key members of his inner circle, including Vice President Joe Biden, Secretary of State John Kerry, National Security Advisor Susan Rice, and UN Ambassador Samantha Power. It's also important to point out what Deputy National Security Advisor Ben Rhodes had to say about this today. He said, listen, the abstention vote was preferred because the UN hasn't exactly been impartial on this issue.
When it comes to final status issues, we believe that those should be negotiated between the parties.
Rhodes repeating the assertion that the president's done more for Israel's security than any other U.S. president, noting the $38 billion military aid package signed very recently. But when asked whether he thought Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu was committed to peace, Rhodes sounded a bit skeptical.
And at a certain point, the words and the actions become irreconcilable. And that's what we're concerned about.
Meanwhile, Secretary of State John Kerry said today the United States acted with one primary objective in mind: to preserve the possibility of the two-state solution. He went on to add, while we do not agree with every aspect of this resolution, it rightly condemns the violence and incitement and settlement activity and calls on both sides to take constructive steps to reverse current trends and advance the prospects for a two-state solution. Not all that we're going to hear on this subject, obviously, Shannon, as the administration tries to thread the diplomatic needle on this one. Shannon?
All right, Kevin. Also, we know the president signed into law the National Defense Authorization Act today, but not without a little bit of controversy, right?
Yeah, that's right. The NDAA has always been complicated because it comes with some strings attached. I can tell you right now that it does include $3.2 billion in military spending. And that includes, by the way, and this is important for a lot of our viewers, some 2% increase, a little bit more than 2% increase in salary and in pay and compensation for U.S. service personnel. That's important. But as you pointed out, it certainly comes with a few strings attached and some specific restrictions. Most notably, it also sort of handcuffs the president in his effort to try to close the facility at Guantanamo Bay. It also adds new restrictions on transfers related to Leave and Gitmo. So we'll watch carefully how that all plays out. Shannon, back to you.
All right, Kevin Quirk traveling with the president in Hawaii. Thank you, Kevin. All right, let's talk more about the UN vote and the U.S. decision. Danny Danon is the Israeli ambassador to the UN. He joins us now live from New York. Mr. Ambassador, welcome to Special Report.
Good evening, Shannon.
Your reaction to today's vote?
We are disappointed. We have heard President Obama himself coming to the UN and saying that the only way to promote peace in the Middle East is through direct negotiations and not to adopt resolutions of the Security Council. And we ask ourselves, what happened today? What changed? Why the U.S. abandoned Israel and allowed a shameful resolution to pass at the Security Council right at the transition period?
Republican Senator Tom Cotton out of Arkansas had this to say. He said President Obama is personally responsible for this anti-Israel resolution. His diplomats secretly coordinated the vote, yet he doesn't even have the courage of his own convictions to vote for it. Do you think the president, or the accusations are also out there, that Secretary Kerry actually pushed this resolution? Do you think their fingerprints are on it?
In the last 8 years, we always heard from the administration that they will support constructive steps to promote peace in the Middle East. And there is nothing constructive about this resolution. So when you look at what the Palestinians will do now, they will not come back to the negotiation table. They will continue to come back to the UN, asking for more resolutions regarding the peace process. I think the people in the White House are aware that it is not constructive, it is not helpful. I don't know why they changed the policy of the US, a long-standing policy of standing with Israel and not supporting the enemies of Israel at the UN.
I want to play a little bit of sound from a senior Palestinian official, Saeb Erekat, their reaction on what just happened today at the UN, and then get yours.
This is a day where the international community have utterly rejected the settlement activities, the policies of dictation, the policies of apartheid being employed by the current Israeli government. I hope this message is a clear-cut message to the Israeli people to reach out to achieve peace and to understand that the way to security and peace for all of us is through ending the Israeli occupation, ending the settlement activities.
Does this take you one step closer to achieving peace or some two-state solution, Ambassador?
Absolutely not. I have heard also the Hamas celebrating the great victory, but it's an empty victory. We know that the only way to move forward is through direct negotiations. We actually did it in the past with Egypt, with Jordan, but for the Palestinians, it's easier for them to come here, to pass resolutions, and to continue with the incitement and violence in the Middle East. It will not bring us anywhere. I think the people in the administration are aware of that, and the people who voted today, they knew they're voting for an empty, meaningless resolution.
Well, and I understand the Prime Minister's office has said that Israel does not intend to comply with it. My understanding also of the resolution is that it doesn't contain sanctions for Israel. So where do we go from here?
Well, now actually the Palestinians will continue to come back to the UN, to international organizations, and they will try to have another resolution against Israel instead of coming to the negotiating table. So if somebody actually wants to promote peace in the Middle East, it is through direct negotiations. We welcome President-elect Trump's statement that he said that the only way to promote peace is to have both sides sitting down and negotiating, not through the UN, which we know that is so biased and it's obsessed about Israel. Look what's happening now in Syria. And they're focusing on Israel, telling us, the Jewish people, we cannot actually build and pray in Jerusalem. It is outrageous, Shannon.
Ambassador Danny Danon, we appreciate your time today, sir. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
The reversal on Israel is not the only foreign policy item causing an uproar tonight. Correspondent Peter Doocy is in West Palm Beach, Florida, on the evolving relationship between Donald Trump and Vladimir Putin.
A Christmas card from the Kremlin arrived today, and there was no mention of the increasing tensions over nuclear arsenals. Instead, Russia's President Putin wrote to America's next president, Donald Trump, in a letter dated last week, that his holiday wish is that after inauguration, the two nations can, quote, take real steps to restore the framework of bilateral cooperation in different areas, as well as bring our level of collaboration on the international scene to a qualitatively new level. Mr. Trump says that was a nice letter, and that, quote, I hope both sides are able to live up to these thoughts and that we do not have to travel an alternate path. The cordial nature of both letters is confusing, since an MSNBC anchor said she spoke to Mr. Trump this morning using new press secretary Sean Spicer's cell phone, and he took a much more aggressive posture.
Let it be an arms race. We will outmatch them at every pass. and outlast them all.
And outlast them all.
The back and forth between former Cold War foes began yesterday.
We need to strengthen combat capability of strategic nuclear force.
A Trump tweet quickly followed where he pledged, quote, the United States must greatly strengthen and expand its nuclear capability until such time as the world comes to its senses regarding nukes. Putin's response to that was passive, saying at a press conference today he wasn't surprised.
Mr. Trump, there is nothing new here. During his election campaign, he has spoken about the need to strengthen U.S. nuclear capabilities.
Just days before Christmas, Eric Trump has announced he won't be fundraising for his foundation because he doesn't want people donating just to get to his dad. Eric tells the New York Times, quote, as unfortunate as it is, I understand the quagmire. You do a good thing that backfires. Now, his dad is weighing in, tweeting, quote, my wonderful son Eric will no longer be allowed to raise money for children with cancer because of a possible conflict of interest with my presidency. Isn't that a ridiculous shame? He loves these kids, has raised millions of dollars for them, and now must stop. Wrong answer. And just yesterday, counselor to the president, Kellyanne Conway, warned what would happen if the Eric Trump Foundation was targeted.
These folks are trying to help people in need, and those people are going to suffer now because folks are pointing out what they think to be improprieties.
The world's most famous golfer joined the world's most famous golf course owner for a round of golf today. Tiger Woods, who lives nearby in Jupiter, asked to play 18 with the president-elect. We're told the two ditched golf carts and walked Mr. Trump's course, and were out there for about 5 hours. Shannon?
Peter Ducey in Florida, thank you. President Obama has promised a smooth and efficient transition to the incoming Trump administration. But from President Obama's enacting new regulations that ban new offshore drilling to President-elect Donald Trump's meddling in foreign policy, it appears both sides are making life a little bit difficult for each other. Correspondent Rich Edson tells us how from the State Department tonight.
On the surface, a coordinated, respectful transition of immense power.
President Obama, who by the way, I've gotten along with so well, No. He's really doing great. He's been so nice.
It's just been a few days since I last talked to the president-elect about a whole range of transition issues. That cooperation is going to continue.
However, the Obama administration is constraining its predecessor, and President-elect Donald Trump is already setting and confusing U.S. foreign policy the month before his inauguration. At home, President Obama banned drilling this week in hundreds of millions of acres of the Arctic and Atlantic Oceans and used a 1953 law to ensure a more difficult process for the next administration to reverse that prohibition. The current president also dismantled a dormant immigration registry system liberals feared the incoming president could have used to fulfill a campaign promise and ban immigrants from certain countries.
Things are going to happen like you haven't seen happen in many, many decades.
For his part, the next president is already reshaping American foreign policy. The president-elect criticized the Central Intelligence Agency for determining Russia had interfered in the U.S. election and blamed the outrage on bitter Democrats. Russia's president joined him in that opinion.
In my opinion, it is humiliating. One must be able to lose with dignity.
Mr. Trump also accepted a phone call from Taiwan, angering China, and he's further threatened China over its trade and economic policies. While the president-elect has called for Congress to increase spending on the U.S. military, he also declared on Twitter that the country must greatly strengthen and expand its nuclear capability. Then, President-elect Trump interfered with an Obama administration vote on a United Nations Security Council resolution criticizing Israel. Trump urged the U.S. to vote against it, and Israel reportedly enlisted the Trump transition team to pressure the resolution supporters to drop the Egyptian-sponsored measure. And the president-elect is looking further beyond that, already speaking with Egypt's president regarding negotiations on a Middle East peace process. President Obama finishing his term while the president-elect Donald Trump looks forward to his is an explicit demonstration to the world at how much U.S. policy has changed because of this election. Shannon?
Rich Edson from the State Department. Thank you, Rich. The FBI and Homeland Security Department are warning law enforcement officials about ISIS calls for attacks on U.S. houses of worship over the holidays. Fox News is told the posting made mention of a number of specific churches. We're not told how many or which churches were mentioned by ISIS. Fox is told there remains no specific credible threat to the homeland. The current threat is described as in line with standard rhetoric from ISIS. The Tunisian man suspected of driving a truck into a crowd of Christmas shoppers in Berlin Monday is dead tonight. Anis Amri was killed in a shootout with police in Milan, Italy. German Chancellor Angela Merkel, under enormous pressure over her open-door immigration policy, is ordering an investigation about how a suspected terrorist could elude detection both before and after the attack. Donald Trump is tweeting about it, calling it a purely religious threat, which turned into a reality. Senior Foreign Affairs correspondent Greg Palcott has the latest from the German capital.
Gunned down and killed on a street in a suburb of the Italian city of Milan, the man thought responsible for the deadly truck attack in Berlin, Germany, Monday night. 24-year-old Tunisian man Anis Amri, seen in a video posted by ISIS just hours after his death, pledging allegiance to the terror group, somehow made his way from Berlin to southeast France and then by train to Turin and Milan, Italy, a trip of some 600 miles. All the while, he was the most wanted man in Europe. In fact, he was only caught by a routine Italian police street patrol. When he was asked for identity papers, he refused and shot the police, injuring one. They fired back with deadly aim.
The state police reacted, and the person who attacked our officers was killed.
The Milan shootout triggered an instant firestorm of recriminations in Berlin. Despite police surveillance and tightened borders, how he could have moved around so easily. And how he was able to stay in Germany for 18 months before the attack while under suspicion. And did he act alone?
It is very important to determine whether there was a network of helpers, a network of supporters in planning and executing this deed, and the suspect's escape.
Also very much still under fire, German Chancellor Angela Merkel, as more reports indicate that Amri could have taken advantage of the huge influx of refugees to Germany in 2015. And with the immigration system swamped, he was able to act at will.
We can be relieved at the end of this week that one acute threat has ended, but the general threat of terrorism continues.
Relief and fear echoed on the streets of Berlin today.
He can be there, or there, and now...
Now he's caught. Now he's dead.
Yeah.
It's a relief because there's no more danger, but I don't think it stops there.
In fact, German officials tonight say they remain on high alert and the investigation remains open, which means we could be seeing more raids like the one police staged at a mosque which they believe Amri attended. This, as the outstanding questions remain and the unanswered threats also are out there. And that's why the people here won't have a restful holiday period. Back to you, Shannon.
Greg, thank you very much. The FBI is investigating a breach of security at the Federal Deposit Insurance Corporation that happened back in 2010. Two sources close to the investigation tell Fox News forensic analysis of the hacking suggests it was a Chinese state-sponsored operation. A separate government official says the chairman of the FDIC publicly acknowledged the breach in congressional testimony in July. China appears to be preparing to put surface-to-air missiles on islands in its disputed territories for the first time. U.S. officials tell Fox News the missiles have been moved from the mainland to the South China Sea. It would be the latest move from an increasingly aggressive China since President-elect Donald Trump took a congratulatory phone call from Taiwan's president, raising questions about the long-standing U.S. One China policy. It appears President Obama and the U.S. will not be directly involved in the fate of Syria. Russian leader Vladimir Putin says Moscow, Iran, Turkey, and Syria will hold peace discussions in January. Putin says the next step is a nationwide ceasefire. The State Department says the U.S. will continue working with its partners toward that goal. Movie star Carrie Fisher is in critical condition tonight after what's being described as a cardiac episode on an airplane flight from London to Los Angeles. She was rushed to the hospital upon landing. The 60-year-old Fisher is best known for portraying Princess Leia in the Star Wars movies alongside Harrison Ford. Tonight, we wrap up our series on the first 100 days of the Donald Trump administration with a look at how the president-elect intends to help people with child care and elder care. Correspondent Alicia Acuna has the story from Reno, Nevada.
Single mom Sarah O'Grady of Nevada can't afford traditional daycare for her 2 children.
I'm what we call a working poor, I guess you could say.
She relies on a patchwork of family and babysitters, a reality that hit her while on the phone with her mother.
I never see my kids. I'm at work constantly, 12-hour days. I'm like, is this really what it takes to have to be able to take care of my kids? And she's like, yep.
He will focus on making quality childcare affordable and accessible for all.
President-elect Trump's proposed Affordable Child Care and Elder Care Act would guarantee 6 weeks paid maternity leave for mothers who don't already get paid leave from their employers. It would offer dependent care savings accounts that roll over year to year so people could start setting aside money before they even have children. Those under a certain income ceiling could deduct child care expenses up to a certain amount. Same for stay-at-home parents. For low-income families, the government would provide spending rebates through the Earned Income Tax Credit. To make all this happen, Tax Foundation economist Alan Cole says it would require a lot of money and a rewriting of the tax code.
I could see this proposal running at least $500 billion in 10 years, and maybe closer to $1 trillion, depending on what things get included. And they may have to scale that back because they might think that's too much to cost the Treasury.
There are investments in human capital. There are investments in allowing parents to go to work and obtain self-sufficiency.
Marty Elquist works for the Children's Cabinet, a nonprofit in Nevada. The state ranks 47th overall for child well-being, according to researchers at University of Nevada, Las Vegas.
A mom who makes the median income in the state of Nevada with an infant and a preschooler would have to spend 54% of her income just to pay for childcare.
While parents we talk to and the experts say they are hopeful for the improvements promised, today the fact remains childcare in this state and many others is more expensive than college tuition. The other part of Trump's proposal addressing the seemingly insurmountable expense of elder care. For example, Colorado is expected to see a 68% increase in the 65-plus population between now and 2030, according to a report prepared by the Keystone Policy Center. He wants dependent care savings accounts for this purpose as well. And Trump proposes a pre-tax deduction limited to $5,000 per year for elder care costs. Until Trump's plan takes shape, it's a bit of a holding pattern for those in the business of care.
Those of us that are in the operational side of the business are a little reluctant to invest too heavily, not knowing what lies ahead.
Nancy Schwam, Chief Business Development Officer of Vivage, which runs senior living communities, says one of her company's biggest issues right now is labor. The average age of a nurse in Colorado is 50, and only 5% of nurses go into long-term care.
When people come to us, this is their home, and so all the services that they need, from doing laundry to cleaning their room, those all require workers, and our biggest cost center is our labor force.
It's not easy being a caregiver.
No.
Karen Brown left her career to become a family caregiver. Her mother saved significantly, but round-the-clock care following a stroke shattered the nest egg. Now, assisted care runs them $85,000 a year.
But I can say if my family situation is any clue, the challenges we had were around two issues: money and caregivers.
Brown now makes the issue of elder care her mission, something she feels Americans need to consider earlier in life.
You always hear that phrase, it takes a village to raise a child, to care for, to love, to nurture them through those early years. I actually say it takes a village to care for an aging person in the last chapters of their life.
Over and over, those in childcare and elder care say it's expensive and complex because it requires humans. It's not something you can automate. In Denver, Alicia Acuna, Fox News.
And you can watch all 15 parts of the series on our show homepage, foxnews.com/special report. Now, some good news on this night before Christmas. Religion correspondent Lauren Green shows us how some folks are working very hard to make sure some kids going through an incredibly tough time have a good Christmas.
For thousands of Christian refugees fleeing the scourge of ISIS terrorists and civil wars, Christmas will come with sadness and hardship. Many have lost their homes and their way of life. But one organization is trying to make a positive difference.
We're giving them a Christmas, the children, giving them a Christmas that
the way it used to be before they were either displaced or refugees.
The program is called Christmas for Refugees, which has given thousands of children a taste of a Merry Christmas. These images from last year's celebrations show how just for a few hours, children whose lives have been changed forever through war and strife can still believe that Christmas means something good and pure. In the basement of an undisclosed local church, they sing songs, eat a meal, even get a visit from Santa. And at the end of the party, they each go home with a bag of food and gifts.
Many of these children had iPads and went to private schools. Now they are sitting with the entire family in one room, often in a tent, no transportation, no school, no nothing, without hope, without a future, and with much of their homes, particularly those in the Nineveh Plain, destroyed. And what we are trying to do is to give them a little hope, to bring Christmas back to them the way it used to be for them before this devastation happened to the Christian community in the Middle East.
This year, the program will help about 6,000 children in displaced areas, including thousands in northern Iraq. Most of them will never be able to return to their homes because they have none to go back to now. Most are destroyed and looted. But the program helps give them hope that regardless of where they are, it is still Christmas. In New York, Lauren Green, Fox News.
Stocks were up today. The Dow gained 15. The S&P 500 finished ahead 3. NASDAQ picked up 15. For the week, the Dow was up about a half percentage point. The S&P 500 gained a quarter point. NASDAQ also gained a half. Well, Donald Trump goes nuclear again, and supporters of Israel are not far behind. We'll get reaction from the panel when we come back.
Our vote today does not in any way diminish the United States' steadfast and unparalleled commitment to the security of Israel, the only democracy in the Middle East. We would not have let this resolution pass had it not also addressed counterproductive actions by the Palestinians.
That is our ambassador to the UN, Samantha Power, today after the abstention from the vote. Let's bring in our panel, Jonah Goldberg, senior editor at National Review, Molly Hemingway, senior editor at The Federalist, Charles Lane, opinion writer for The Washington Post, and syndicated columnist Charles Krauthammer. And to anyone who thought it was going to be a quiet holiday week of news, it's definitely not been the case. Jonah, what do you make of this? Because what Ambassador Power said is this doesn't diminish the U.S. Steadfast and unparalleled commitment to the security of Israel. That's not how Israel's interpreting this.
That's not how basically any observer is interpreting this. This is like me punching someone in the face. It's me saying I'm not punching you in the face. Of course, this diminishes America's steadfast support for Israel. What I think is the most remarkable thing about this is that this is to no productive end. We've spent 8 years listening to a lot of supporters of Israel, a lot of liberal Jewish supporters of Israel insist that Barack Obama is unparalleled in his support for Israel. And he's going out the door, flipping a middle finger to Israel for no apparent purpose. And if you listen to Ben Rhodes, you will listen in vain for a coherent answer to why they're doing this. And I think what this does is reveal that all along the rhetoric and posturing towards Israel concealed where their emotional heart is, which is they've always thought this was about the settlements, and this is a way to, and they held off doing this earlier because they knew it would hurt Hillary Clinton. Now that Hillary's gone, they're doing it simply out of spite and out of a sense of sort of emotional commitment to screwing Israel.
Yeah, and to be clear, we are one of the few who had veto power over this, so it never went anywhere at all. And the U.S. Affirmatively chose not to do that. We do have a little bit of audio from the phone call with Ben Rhodes this afternoon explaining what had happened and why. Here's a bit of that.
The Israeli government wants the conversation to be about anything other than the settlement activity. We've been warning President Obama and Secretary Kerry publicly and privately for years that the trend line of settlement construction and settlement activity was just increasing Israel's international isolation.
And Molly, a lot of people would argue this resolution also isolates Israel. I mean, moves to that end.
Yes, and this, if anything, gives false hope to Palestinians. This doesn't actually change our policy. It won't change in a few weeks. We'll have a return to what our position of strong support of Israel has been for 40 years. But it'll give false hope to Palestinians. They will think that this gives them claim to something. It could lead to more violence. And showing this kind of moral cowardice and abstaining on this vote, not supporting this democracy, is a perfect coda to 8 years of foreign policy bungling and impotence.
Well, we got this tweet, of course, today, Chuck. I know you're not surprised. There is a tweet from Donald Trump saying, as to the UN, things will be different after January 20th. It's something that Israeli leaders are embracing and celebrating and noting in all their reactions to this vote today.
Well, yeah, I mean, just to pick up on a couple of the points, this does change something real. It changes international law. Security Council resolutions are international law, and that's a tremendous weapon now in diplomacy that the Palestinians can wield.
But apparently, my understanding, unless I'm getting this wrong, is that there are no sanctions that would be imposed on Israel.
No, but the declaration of what's legal and illegal in the name of the Security Council is extremely important for propaganda purposes, for legitimizing people who might try to make private sanctions like the boycott, divest movement.
Also, the International Criminal Court can play into this too.
But just to pick up on the point about what I think is fascinating in terms of the domestic politics of this, just as you said, the Israelis are now kind of openly placing their hopes in a Republican president coming in and crying betrayal at a Democratic president. We have come a long way in this country from the time when support for Israel was a bipartisan, almost unquestioned bipartisan thing. And now you are seeing not just a split between the parties, but you will soon see a split within the Democratic Party that will be provoked by this step, because President Obama has thrown, and John Kerry have thrown their weight behind the voices that have been insisting for a long time within the Democratic Party for a tougher, quote-unquote, policy on Israel that will put a lot of pressure on the pro-Israel forces within the Democratic Party, some of whom have been heard from, such as Chuck Schumer, Ron Wyden, and Sherrod Brown in the Senate today.
And we just got something in from Congresswoman Debbie Wasserman Schultz, formerly of the DNC, heading up the DNC. She said, I condemn in the strongest of terms the United Nations Security Council's passage of what she calls this one-sided anti-Israel resolution, as well as the United States' reckless abstention. So bipartisan condemnation, Charles.
What happened today is that the United States joined the jackals at the UN. That was a phrase used by Pat Moynihan, the great Democratic senator, the former U.S. ambassador, who spoke for the United States standing up in the UN and to resist this kind of disgrace. To give you an idea of how appalling this resolution is, it declares that any Jew who lives in the Jewish quarter of Jerusalem, the Jewish quarter inhabited for 1,000 years, is illegal, breaking international law, essentially an outlaw, can be hauled into the International Criminal Court or into national courts in Europe, which is one of the consequences. The Jewish quarter has been populated by Jews for 1,000 years. In the War of Independence in 1948, the Arabs invaded Israel to wipe it out. They did not succeed, but the Arab Legion succeeded in conquering the Jewish quarter. They expelled all the Jews, they destroyed all the synagogues and all the homes, and for 19 years no Jew could go there. The Israelis got it back in the Six-Day War, and now it's declared that this is not Jewish territory. Remember, it's called the Jewish quarter, but it belongs to other people, and any Jew who lives there is an outlaw. That's exactly what we supported. The resolution is explicit in saying settlements in the occupied territories and in East Jerusalem.
It does. But my question is, why now? I mean, the Obama administration is about to leave. And
yes, because he didn't.
Well, but there's been this very tenuous public cooperation between Obama and Netanyahu, although we always hear behind the scenes they don't like each other personally, or that there are issues that they disagree on. But publicly, they've stayed united. So why now, with 3.5 weeks to go, do you blow that up?
In 2012, running for re-election, Obama spoke at the meeting of AIPAC, the big Jewish lobby, and he said, is there any doubt that I have Israel's back? That's why he didn't want to do it while he was in office. That's why he didn't want to do it in 2016, so it would injure Hillary and show to particularly American Jews who tend to be Democratic that it was all a farce. He does it on the way out, and that's part of why it's so disgraceful. He hid it until there'd be no consequence, and now he's out the door and the damage is done for years. That resolution cannot be undone.
Well, let me bring up a real quick point, and then Joan, I want to get to you. I talked with Senator Graham today, who chairs the subcommittee that controls UN funding, and he was, talking very tough about he's going to do everything he can to block their funding unless this is rolled back or use it as some kind of leverage.
Yeah, I think that points to an important dynamic. This is going to set off a war between Congress and the United Nations that's going to have ramifications for a long time to come. But I also say there's a bizarre irony to this, in that everyone tells us that Bibi Netanyahu and Barack Obama don't like each other. This is a gift to Bibi Netanyahu. It's terrible for Israel. But what this does is it allows Bibi Netanyahu to say persuasively, even to his domestic critics, look, I've been telling you for 8 years, I haven't ruined the relationship with America. It's all because of Obama. And now Obama shows his true colors, and Bibi can say, look, I was right.
Well, and he'll have some backing now and help from Senator Graham and others. I mean, what do we make of this accusation by Senator Tom Cotton and others who have said to me, and probably to some of you too, that this was specifically orchestrated by President Obama and John Kerry?
Well, the Israelis have been saying that for some time, and they say this was all done behind their back, et cetera, et cetera.
But our own lawmakers accusing the White House of doing it.
I'm not sure Tom Cotton was privy to all these conversations. I'm sure he's been briefed by sources in Israel who've been telling that to everyone. I must say I'm struck by the disconnect here. Look what's going on in the Middle East. 500,000 people have been slaughtered in Syria. You have war all over Yemen. Iran is pursuing a nuclear weapon. And the issue that the United Nations Security Council is focused on here a couple days before Christmas and Hanukkah is this.
Is Jews living in the Jewish quarter. It tells you how perverse the UN is and why it's time we cut the cord and stop giving him any money.
Yeah, we'll see if Senator Graham gets his way. That's what's going to happen. All right, next up, our panelists' naughty and nice list this year. You may have to make some last-minute changes based on this conversation.
Contest of ideas as to which direction to take the party. After every single loss, the political party that loses, they go and they do a retrospective. What happened? Where did we make a mistake? Did we do wrong? That debate is going to ensue.
Vice President Biden reflecting on our most recent election. Our panel is back with us now. Molly, I'll start with you. He also said in an LA Times interview about losing the election, these are people I grew up with. They're kids. They're not racist. They're not sexist, but we didn't talk to them. So some, analysis going on.
Yeah, people give Joe Biden a really hard time for his ethical lapses and not being the brightest bulb in the Christmas tree. But this is a guy who won Senate 16 times. He won the Senate seat 6 times, and his political instincts are on point. Democrats should listen to him. It's totally fine if Hillary Clinton needs to cling to conspiracy theories in order to get out of bed in the morning, but that's not a good plan for the rest of the Democratic Party or the media. There needs to be a lot of reflection. I think his point about the inability to communicate with the working class voters is something that Democrats should heed and stop clinging to these conspiracy theories about Russia or Comey or the Electoral College being the source of all their problems. If they want to regain the presidency, legislatures, state legislatures, governorships, they have to take a real hard look at themselves about how they've lost the people.
Okay, with that in mind, what does the group of people running for the DNC chair, or the handful that we have left, say about where Democrats go and how they move forward if they're trying to avoid some of those pitfalls? Chuck?
Well, I mean, of course, one of the front runners is Keith Ellison, who's associated with the Bernie Sanders wing of the party, and who is considered very controversial, in part, fairly or not, because he is African American and a Muslim, and there are people within the party who feel that, even though there's nothing inherently wrong with that, that's potentially.
I think there are specific statements, though, and things that he's made that are.
And the past association with Louis Farrakhan.
Right, it's not just those characteristics or those things.
And we love the UN vote today.
And so Keith Ellison has become, for better or worse, the sort of focal point of a lot of controversy within the party about the direction of the party. I would say that, when you really think about it, if 100,000 or so votes had gone the other way, which they easily could have, we wouldn't be having this conversation. There would be no soul searching going on in the Democratic Party. And so it's worth remembering that the Republicans had their autopsy at the end of the last election that said go this way. They went the opposite way, and they ended up winning the election. Yeah. So, kudos to Joe Biden for being introspective, but it may not, in the end, amount to very much.
All right, I want to make sure that we get to all of your naughty and nice, because we've asked you to give us the year-end decision on this. And Jonah, we'll start with you. We'll go through all of your naughties first.
Okay, so my naughty, I rarely go with sports on the show, but it was Colin Kaepernick, the football player who decided to set a bonfire of arrogance and asininity almost all year long, whereby he denigrated America, denigrated police officers, praised Fidel Castro, and yet couldn't even be bothered to vote. He did damage to his sport, he did damage to his reputation, and he behaved badly on almost every front, and he gets a piece of coal in his
I was going to
stocking.
say, lump of coal, apparently from Jonah. Molly?
I'm going to go with Lena Dunham, who recently said that she wished she'd had an abortion so that she could have good feminist credibility. In addition to how monstrous that notion of killing your unborn might be, it really speaks to sort of all these celebrity idiots, these facile people who think their voices are worth listening to when in fact they're actually just turning off a whole host of voters.
Chuck?
Well, I don't see how you could pick anybody other than Vladimir Putin to be the naughtiest person of the year. I mean, well, it's bad enough that he stole a bunch of emails from the Democrats, but much more consequentially and much worse, his performance on the international stage, helping the massacre in Aleppo and other things, continuing the occupation of Ukraine, I guess kind of goes beyond naughty.
Well, and taking himself Crimea.
Yes,
As a
that's
little
part of the
extra
Ukraine,
prize.
yes.
Yeah. Okay. Charles?
Well, especially today, I have to go with Barack Obama. I know it's not surprising.
Surprising
but
that the president tops Charles Krauthammer's naughty list for 2016.
The guy's got 8 years to enact his agenda. He twice wins, so he's got 2 mandates. And yet at the very last minute, when he's lost his legitimacy, when he's a lame duck, he leaves last-minute landmines behind, things he could never have done when he was still an active politician, in the sense that he had to protect himself or the party. He shuts down the Arctic and the Atlantic for oil and gas drilling, exploration, then he stabs Israel in the back just as a coda. So I give him the lump of coal, and he's sort of retire it for the next 8 years. The lump of coal will help him to light the fires during his years of civilian life.
He's not a fan of coal, as we've come to learn over the last 8 years.
That's
All right,
true.
Now we must briskly get through our nice list. Jonah?
Okay. In distinction from Colin Kaepernick, I picked Vin Scully, who was for 67 years the voice of the Dodgers. He retired as gracefully and as generously and as with much class as any public figure has left the public stage that I can ever think of, and that was a nice note in an otherwise pretty ugly year.
Molly?
This one pains me a little bit as a St. Louis Cardinals fan, but I think we have to give props to the Chicago Cubs, who did such a good job. This was a year that was very politically divisive, and they gave us such a good season of baseball, and that World Series was one for the ages.
Chuck?
In a year when the epidemic of opioid addiction and abuse was a huge tragedy across the country, the Center for Disease Control and Prevention and its head, Tom Frieden, took a forthright stand in pushing doctors to completely reevaluate the way they prescribe these medications. I think it's a good policy that may save lives.
And our final 30 seconds to our own Dr. Krauthammer.
This is the Vin Scully of politicians. David Cameron. He loses a referendum. He goes to the Queen. He offers his resignation. She accepts. He leaves the Parliament. He returns to private life. He leaves no landmines behind. As you can see, I'm still obsessed. That's the way you're supposed to do it. If only we had a queen.
Well, I'm not sure the U.S. is ready for the monarchy, but we do enjoy following the one across the pond. Okay, we fought a revolution over that. That is it for the panel. A special holiday message for you up next. Finally tonight, Bret Baier may be off for the holidays, but he did not leave without first wishing you a very happy holiday. Check it out.
Hi, everybody. Merry Christmas. The Bears are coming to you again. We have been doing this, Paul, Amy, and Daniel, since I took over Special Report. Believe it or not, January 5th will be 8 years, and there has been an evolution of this family. Paul and Daniel and my wife, Amy.
Merry Christmas, everybody. Happy New Year. We wish you a Merry Christmas.
We do, very forcefully. We are excited for the holidays, very excited for Christmas, and we're going to get through it how? Fair, balanced, and unafraid.
That's good.
So we look a little different, but we do want to give you a holiday